Hello and welcome along to episode number 4 of TGP Has a Podcast. This week we'll be doing a preview to the inaugural season of TGP GT, this series' first ever league on the game GT Sport. We're all very much looking forward to the first season and the twists and turns that it may bring us, as it always does when we're taking part in a league on a game for the first time. I'm joined this week by Roy and Callum, so hello gents, how are you?
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Where we're going to be looking forward to a preview of the first season that we've got coming up, the tracks that we'll be racing on, the cars that we might see and might not see in the season we've got coming up ahead, and some of the characteristics of the game which could make this inaugural season a very interesting one indeed, and maybe some drivers that we need to look out for and ones who need to spend a little bit more time on time trial, shall we say. Now, this is the point where normally I would ask my guests what's the first thought that they have about the topic we're going to be discussing, but it hasn't happened yet, so we're going to be avoiding that topic this week, and instead I'm going to ask our panel why we think this is a good move for TGP to come on to GT Sport and how good it will be for the series in general. So, chaps, what do you think? Why do you think this is a good move for TGP?
I personally think it's a good move on the basis that we've never done it before, which is, I think, is always a positive. It's got potential to really be a good league. I mean, you've got plenty of cars, you've got plenty of different tracks that other sort of racing series never have. So I think, for me personally, I'd say it's interesting on the basis that, you know, the cars are very different to what we usually drive compared to open wheel or dirt rally cars and stuff like that. So, yeah, me personally, I think it's overall, you know, a different experience.
And
Yeah,
Roy, what do you think?
I agree. Yeah, it's a good move to diversify the league. You know, give drivers a different challenge. Something we've never done before. You know, we've had successful Project Cars leagues. You know, we've had a successful Dirt League, even FIFA. So it just adds to the diverse range of games that TGP has played on throughout the years.
And actually, on that as well, I would actually say as well. So at the moment, we've got obviously TGP One, F1. We're all mainly on the F1 games. Obviously, we've done a few seasons on Project Cars as well, and then a couple of seasons on the Dirt games as well. The fact that this is a completely different racing game, it means the people who are usually quick on those series and those sort of games as well are probably not sort of necessarily going to be the quickest. So it opens it up for anyone could be fighting for a good result.
Yeah, definitely. I think certainly we're going to see some people who maybe haven't done as well in other series move towards the front, and people who you would typically say that on a racing game normally they would be doing quite well, maybe not doing very well. I think it's a good move for the league as well, as this is kind of more towards the sim racing aspect of esports, and I think that certainly this is an interesting step to see the popularity that it creates. As there's a big buzz around the game in general, isn't there?
There is, yeah. I mean, again, the fact that it's a completely different game compared to the rest of them, I think. It's very different. Everything's different. The cars are different. The track's different. The handling's different. The overall sort of layout of the game itself, in terms of how it's all set up as well. You've got different things such as tyre wear, fuel settings, all of that. So there are different skills as a driver, but then there is also sort of different aspects of the game itself that the other leagues in TGP sort of you can't physically do. I mean, on F1 you can't change the tyre wear and things like that. It's set. Whereas this one, you've got a bit more freedom to sort of mould the league in a way that you want, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I would you say as well that we've obviously done leagues on Project Cars and they've been successful. We've had quite a few seasons we've run there now, and multiple different champions, and they were always very successful and popular leagues. Are we going to expect to see maybe some of the chaps who did quite well on that game mirror that into GT Sport?
I sort of agree with Roy there. I think they're two very different games in terms of sort of the Project Cars side and G Sport. Project Cars is very simulator oriented in terms of handling, while sort of GT Sport is maybe slightly more arcade-like. But I think if you're fast, you're always going to be fast, I think, no matter what sort of game it's going to be. So I think it's going to be an interesting one, that is for sure. Obviously, I think the skills are going to transfer over. But again, even slight little differences in handling models and the type of cars you play can sometimes have a dramatic difference on sort of people's skill levels and pace.
Yeah, like we have seen people a lot more competitive on in TGP cars as opposed to TGP one, for example. So it'll be interesting to see how they'll fare. Will they be as competitive as they were, relatively speaking, in terms of how they are on F1 or in project cars? So I think this is another interesting medium to test people.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I think we should. We've drawn on it a lot already, but maybe some of the characteristics of the game and its comparisons with similar racing games that are out there. So, how will the characteristics really affect some of the racing that we'll see? I think is what we're all really looking forward to. Is you can race relatively well on GT Sport compared to some other games. So what are some of the key parts of the characteristics which do lend itself to some great racing, Roy?
I would say it's going to be interesting. We'll touch on the cars that are available, but like the different drivetrains that the cars have. For example, a mid-engine car, its rears will degrade quicker. It'll provide more oversteer, whereas if you have a front-engine car, it'll be understeer that affects you more. So as races go on, the characteristics of the car will change due to the tire wear. So it'll be interesting to see as races progress how drivers cope with these challenges. So car choice will be something to consider.
Yeah, and obviously following on from that as well, I think the overall handling model as well, obviously the cars, as Roy said, depending on the drivetrain, it will act differently throughout the duration of the race. But I think the handling model itself is very simple in terms of no matter whether, for example, the key talking point is usually wheel versus pad. However, there's not that much of a gap because on a wheel, me personally, on GT Sport I've switched from both when I can't be bothered to plug it in. You turn it in, the car doesn't really react, and that is the same on the pad as well. So that lends itself, I think, to closer overall racing from lap to lap qualifying as well as race pace. So it should be interesting.
Yeah.
And does a game like this, you mentioned on it just very briefly there, Softy, qualifying for the race, is it as important to get a good starting position in this game as maybe others? As we saw in Project Cars on a number of times, someone could be quite far down the grid, but if they get a fantastic start, they can find themselves going from 7th to 3rd. Is qualifying as important on a game like GT Sport as it was to other games that we've done leagues on before?
I would say it's actually more important. I think the handling model, the type of game it is, I think when it comes to daily races on GT Sport, even though the rolling starts, once you start at the back, you're pretty much like 4 or 5 seconds behind the next car. But I think with the type of cars it is, it's not going to be a case of the faster guys are just going to whiz straight past everyone and off into the distance because it's the type of circuits that we're going to be racing on and the type of cars. Yes, they are relatively equal, even with balanced performance on. However, I think just the nature of the handling model, it's going to lend itself to just being near the front to be able to get a good result. So I think if you start at the back, in 20th place, whatever it is, I still think it's going to be far more of a struggle to to really get through the field and get with the top guys if you have a bad qualifying.
Yeah, definitely. So we're running some interesting regulations for the season this season, which we will run through the rules and regulations we got on now. So we mentioned a bit about tyre wear. Now this is, I think, an interesting dynamic that we'll find in the season, as it's going to be anywhere between ×5 and ×18 progression. Now there's not going to be a mandatory pit stop that we're going to run, but if you can look after your tyres during the race, and you could find yourself very beneficial from it. Is tyre wear something that's easy to manage on this game, or how are the drivers going to be approaching this one?
I would say it's pretty car dependent. Certain cars are easier to control, whereas other cars, you can snap under braking. If you have like an excessively worn rear left tire, it can be problematic when you hit the brake pedal. So, that's something to definitely consider. Once your tires reach a certain wear rate, if your tires are about 60% worn, that's when you've kind of reached the danger zone where the cars become more and more undrivable as the race progresses. So if you can manage your tires, track position is definitely, there's certain circuits where track position is more valuable than others. Um, so yeah, tires are definitely something to consider when it manages a car.
Yeah, and I think as well, like with the tyre wear sort of progression being as it is, it's people could try, and sort of go to the end, etc., or they could try and pit. But I think the way the tyre wear works and is going to be set for, the GT League that we're doing, you could see a variety of different strategies. I think if you're just outside the podium, but you're relatively close to the front, I think you could see people trying to go a lot longer or potentially not making stops and things like that. So I think it's going to be a lot more interesting in GT Sport to see the different type of strategies that I think people are going to employ to get the best positions.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got the added bonus as well of fuel depletion being turned off. So what we basically have is drivers who are now going to be encouraged to actually push more. You've not got to worry about keeping that fuel level low. So you're going to want to have the engine turned up for maximum performance, which could lead to further tyre wear. So do those two regulations go hand in hand to creating some really good racing?
I think they do. And as you touched on, obviously the no fuel having an issue. Obviously, different cars for some reason start with different levels of fuel and sort of fuel rates, which I think is a bit annoying. Hence why it's turned off. Obviously, so the viewers know why. But I do definitely think that the harder you push, the more okay, yeah, you're going to gain time. You're going to wear your tyres out more, and it could have the opposite effect of what you really wanted it to happen. But again, I think it's all about the strategy of deciding, okay, I'm in this position. I need to maybe gain more time if you're fighting for the win. Maybe being a bit more reserved. So again, it all comes down to the strategy, which I think is going to play a massive factor in, and you're going to see a variety of different, I think, results compared to what we expect.
Yeah, I think with refueling turned off, it also means that the battles that we see are going to be mostly on track, and it's not going to be purely decided on strategy.
Yes, which
Because
is
it is a pity that the fuel rates are different. Um, yeah, it is one of the limitations of the game, unfortunately.
But that's a good thing, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's fantastic that we will be seeing authentic racing of drivers who are. Because when you're caught in a battle, it's hard not to be involved in it, isn't it? And you're going to want to push rather than thinking, actually, I will conserve the tyres.
I completely agree. I think, with fuel depletion not being on at all, obviously I think it does give people incentive to have to worry one less about fuel. You can focus more on the racing of going as fast as you can. And for me personally, I've never really been a huge fan of pit stops having an outcome on battles. If two people are close on the circuit and close on pace, I'd rather see them battle throughout the entire full length of the race if they can't pull away from each other, rather than one person having a bad pit stop or anything like that.
Agree. Yeah, because it's going to be it would be perhaps detrimental to the entertainment if you have drivers who just sit behind other cars just conserving fuel just so they can jump them in the pit stop. This refueling takes away from on-track battles sometimes. So I don't think we're particularly losing any entertainment value by not having refueling.
No, I agree with both of you. I think it's a really interesting balance that we're going to see here for the league, which is great news. So let's take a little look at the driver list that we've got. Obviously, the three of us are all taking part and very much looking forward to that. But we have some, very much the TGP regulars involved in there as well. Obviously, we've got Dom, Jack in there. We've got Joe joining us, Aidan, and others along those lines. Then we've got some sort of more returnees, I guess, as such. We've got Coat coming to the league. He's obviously been recently taking part in TGP Dirt. Alex Coates coming and joining us in TGP GT as well. So we've got quite a mixture there of drivers who've achieved a lot in TGP cars, TGP 1, TGP 2. We've got multiple champions in there from all sorts of disciplines. But as we've already mentioned, the game is so different to others that we've played. Does this level the playing field, or does this mean that we could have Alistair, for say, coming and winning the first 3 rounds and it not being a surprise?
In a way, yes. I think, again, as I sort of briefly mentioned earlier, the fast guys are always going to be fast. If they like the game, they're always going to be up there. Of course, they're not always going to be the fastest. However, as you mentioned, we've got multiple champions from all different series in TGP doing this. So, one, I think the racing is going to be absolutely fantastic, whether the champions of different series are at the top or not. But I definitely think you could see maybe people who are not as quick on those other series fighting for potential wins, fighting for potential podiums, and potentially picking up pieces if things go astray for the top guys.
Yeah, I think the field is looking pretty strong, with the amount of champions that we have, and even drivers who may not have had huge success in other leagues in TGP, I think could be right up there, because just the game suits them.
I see. I'm looking through this list of drivers again. It makes me more excited for it, actually. And I think that you're right. We've got such a mixture of people involved in here: champions, race winners, from all sorts of categories. It's going to be really interesting to see who can hit the ground running. As that, there are a couple of people there that you sort of think that you should be towards the top for multiple different reasons, but actually. As with every sort of motorsport, if you have a bad race or something doesn't quite go amiss, something does go amiss even, then your season's turned upside down. And I think that we are in for a very exciting driver lineup there. We've got some interesting characters in there as well, and some with history with each other, to put it politely. Don't you agree?
Yes,
I would say so. Yeah, definitely.
Well, so fantastic choice of drivers there. We're going with the Group 3 cars as well for TGP GT for its inaugural season, which I think is a wise move, as there is such a wide range of cars to choose from. Now, we mentioned that there's some that we may see more often than others, but what are some of the key car characteristics that drivers are going to be looking out for when picking their car? Because whatever car they pick to begin with, they have to keep during the season. They're only allowed one car change throughout, and that goes via steward's approval. So it's not guaranteed that you're going to actually be able to change your car. So how does picking the car prior to the season matter so much? And what are some of the things that drivers are going to be looking out for?
I think regardless of what car you pick, there will be certain circuits where the characteristics of that car are perhaps not as suited to it as others. So there are certain cars out there that are quite grippy, but then will lack straight line speed. So on a circuit like Brands Hatch, for example, it will be very competitive, but maybe at a circuit like Tokyo Expressway, it won't be as competitive because its straight line speed is lacking, which I think will also, potentially mix up the order in certain races. If, someone has prioritized straight line speed, you could see them further up, and vice versa. If we see a more downforce, heavy track, we will see people who've chosen to pick those lighter cars perhaps further up the order. So, and also in terms of handling characteristics, people will be looking for cars that are perhaps easier to drive just for, a safety point of view, or maybe people will want to, challenge themselves and, perhaps go for a car that is quick, but, might lend itself to being easy to make mistakes in. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see, but when the season starts, what cars people have gone for.
Yeah, and I think as well, when it comes to that, I think for GT Sport, I think it's never been so important for people to pick the right cars, because again, as you said, once you pick your car, you've got one change throughout the entire season, and you can only change that if it's for a good reason as well there. So if you make the wrong decision, at the start of the season, you've pretty much got to live with that for the majority, if not all of that season. So that could right there make or break your season before it's even begun.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got such a I think the wide range of manufacturers as well that within that could make things very interesting to see who goes for what sort of manufacturer as well. There are drivers that I know will maybe be what's the word I'm looking for, more favourable to some manufacturers than others. So have some drivers got to put that behind them and go for the car that suits them best, as opposed to ones that maybe they have loyalty to, or the ones that they think are fastest?
I think so, yeah. Again, I think it's whether people do a lot of practice or just playing the game in general to try and get an idea. I think everyone's got a rough idea, I think, of what cars they may end up picking or not. But again, if you pick the wrong decision, you've got to sort of live with that. So I think loyalties cannot come into the decisions for picking the cars, because again, you might like one specific car, like McLaren, for example. I'm British. I do like McLaren, but you could very easily pick that car because you think, I like that car, and then you get into the season, everyone picks all different cars, and you're thinking, well, actually, I'm sort of midfielder at the back because of it. So, I think it's got to be about pure performance rather than loyalties.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think loyalties need to be pushed aside, and you go for a car that you like as opposed to a car, or rather a car that you're comfortable driving and competitive in, rather than a car that you just like the look of or like the brand of.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some of the cars that we may see more often than not? What are some of the ones which are, in theory, going to be the quicker ones as an overall package, do we think?
I personally think, again, obviously Roy's got a lot more experience on GT Sport than I do, but from what I've seen in terms of just playing the game, I think the two ones that I think are similar in some ways is the Supra, obviously Toyota Supra there. It's decent in a straight line. It's okay in the corners, obviously, so that one is definitely more for straight line speed. But then the GTR handles horrendously in fast corners, but it is an absolute beast on the straights, whereas the opposite, McLaren, rubbish in a straight line, but very nice through the corners. So there's a wide swing of different characteristics, if I can speak English, obviously compared to others. So, again, you could see a variety of different different manufacturers and cars. I'm sure Roy's probably got his ones as well.
Yeah, I would agree with the Supra. I think the Supra is a decent all-round car. Perhaps geared more towards straight line speed as opposed to cornering, but there are some tracks, as mentioned, where straight line speed will come into it. I think other cars that people may pick, the 911 Porsche is a decent all-round car, but geared more towards handling. Other cars that we might see, the Mercedes AMG is another all-round car. It's kind of in the middle of everything. Decent straight line speed, decent cornering. If someone were to go with the straight line speed, then Nissan is definitely an option there. I think also the 4GT could come into it. And then also there's the Audi R8, which I think we may see multiple people driving, because it is perhaps the best car in the corners overall. But again, are people willing to sacrifice straight line speed on other circuits? So, it'll be interesting to see what people end up with.
Yeah, I think there are definitely some cars that we may see what I'm going to call one-off appearances from, where maybe one or two people may go towards and use them. I know that actually quite a handy little car is the little Peugeot RCZ. I think from driving before is actually very good on the handling front, awful on the straight line speed front, but maybe for the more twisty circuits, someone driving some of that could be seen. Maybe we'll see an Aston or two. There is. I think that's why this is going to be so interesting. Is that we could end up with, of the 18 drivers that we've got, 18 different cars. We could probably end up with 3. But I think that there is such a wide range of machines there which are not bad, that could end up creeping in and could be a bit of a surprise choice as well as a little surprise package as well, I guess. Also, we've got to look at maybe some of the cars that we likely not to see, and I think definitely some of the more Citroen GT styled cars we might avoid seeing, might we, chaps?
Potentially, it's not a bad little car, the Citroen, but it's in terms of competitiveness, it may not be right up there. It's very good off the line, its cornering's decent, but like it's kind of bettered by something else in every way, so it maybe isn't a car that we're going to see. Some people also find it, to be a very oversteery car, so it doesn't suit them. I think another car that we won't see would be the Z4. It's again, it's one of those cars that is kind of bettered by something in each category, so I think those two will be cars that we perhaps don't see.
And I think from memory, the little McLaren as well, the 650S, I think is probably
Yeah,
one of the worst Group 3 cars I've ever driven.
yeah, it's like it's grippy, but that's kind of all it has going for it. In the corners, for example, it'll be bettered by the Alfa Romeo or the Honda, and of course the Audi. And then its straight line speed isn't that impressive either. The Atenza isn't, again, isn't really the best. The Hyundai Genesis, I think, will be. I would be surprised if we see a Hyundai Genesis on the grid, and also the Renault. The Renault off the line is abysmal, and its straight line speed is also pretty tragic. But its cornering speed is brilliant. But I mean, I think you're just sacrificing too much.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, we've mentioned it a lot so far, but we haven't actually talked about them yet, and that's the circuits that we're going to be using. So we've got a 16-round calendar, which is brilliant. Now the first 2 weeks we're actually going to be running 3 races a night. So a busy schedule for our boys there, because normally we would find on say F1 games that there would be 2 circuits a night. Project Cars more recently we've had a sprint and a feature race. So how difficult is it going to be for the drivers to prepare themselves for the first 2 weeks? Because it's not even if it's the end of the season. They're coming to a game where we haven't done any league racing on before, and suddenly there's 3 races a night. I mean, how difficult is that going to be?
It's definitely going to be difficult. I mean, I think people do like to do a bit of practice beforehand, just to get to grips with the cars as well as the circuits. But I think for at least for the first 2 weeks, you can't really do that because again, three races a night. It's going to be very difficult to really get a good number in for each circuit. So that's going to, I think, spice the racing up even more. And it seems like the first 2 weeks as well, we've got a variety of different style of circuits as well, so it should spice it up a lot more.
Yeah, I think it's a very varied calendar, which is why car choices. It depends. There will be sacrifices made. In certain tracks.
Yeah, so we're starting off at a familiar circuit to the TGP series, at Interlagos, a track obviously we've been running on at TGP 1 and 2 ever since we've been doing them. But obviously in very different circumstances, shall we say. How will a more experienced TGP driver, let's say, approach a track like that in the sort of the first 10 minutes of qualifying? Will it be as crucial to get a good spot, let's say, on the grid in the circuit that everyone knows quite well, or not?
I think so. Yeah, I think that the more experienced drivers will, at least I can sort of speak for myself. Usually, when it comes to any sort of qualifying session, I'd go out, get a banker in, make sure it's a clean lap. Make sure everything's as it should be. And then throughout the quali session, try and improve as much as I can. And then obviously last few minutes, absolutely hammer it round and try and go for the absolute fastest lap. But I think it'll be interesting in terms of qualifying to see the different approaches. Obviously tyres as well. What tyres people pick, obviously due to the tyre wear. And I think I think the qualifying sessions could play, I think, more of a role in people's performances in the race than any other series so far, bar F1 at Monaco, obviously due to the game. So I think qualifying is going to be far more interesting than I think a lot of people expect it to be.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's quite a long session to a certain degree just to have one. Because you're probably going to get the qualifying. You're going to get 2 runs, as Sophie said. There may be 3 on some tracks potentially, but at the longer circuits that we have, say like Spa-Francorchamps later on in the year, Sardinia, not Sardinia, sorry. We've got Saint-Croix as well in there later on in the season. So those are long lap circuits. So positioning in a 10-minute session and timing become even more crucial then, don't they?
Yeah, it's going to be more crucial to get a lap in. You're not going to have as many chances. So for the longer laps, and I know it's Spa, it's around a 2:15 lap potentially, in that kind of area of 2:15 to 2:20. So I mean, like, that's a pretty long time. When it's only a 10-minute session, it's going to be crucial to find the time to actually put a lap in. Because if you mess up your first lap, then chances are you've only got one left.
Yeah, and I also think as well, slipstream is going to play another part, and a massive part in qualifying. And I think the more experienced people will probably try and get a slipstream from other people, because as we've seen I think if anyone plays GT Sport, just for playing it, the slipstream on a lot of events are pretty damn powerful. So I think play it smart as well when it comes to qualifying. Sit behind someone who's roughly the same pace as you, and you're probably going to go past them because of how strong the slipstream is. Obviously, you've got different settings on that to make sure it's not too powerful. But even so, if you're in a slipstream, you're going to be gaining a fair amount of time over the course of lap, especially later on in the season when you've got the likes of Monza.
So I'll run through the calendar in order, as we're obviously going to 16 different venues, some familiar places for the series and some new places as well, which are obviously exclusive to GT Sport. So we're starting off in Interlagos, then we're going to Dragon Trail. Phil's favourite circuit, Nürburgring, is week 1. Week 2, we've got Kyoto, Brands Hatch, and Lago Maggiore, which is week 2, so another 3 races there. Then we're back to 2 races a night with Alsace, the Village Circuit, Tokyo Expressway, the East Outer Loop. Then we've got Suzuka and Sardinia. We're then going on to Monza, Laguna Seca, Mount Panorama, Saint-Croix, Spa-Francorchamps, and then we're ending the season at Red Bull Ring. So as you said, all very different circuits there. I'm trying to think, which ones do we think are going to bring out the classic racing that we normally expect from TGP Series? What are the ones where we could end up seeing some really close racing, which you may not expect to see them from?
I'd probably say, I think, the obvious ones, I think the circuits that everyone knows, Interlagos, Brands Hatch to some extent, Nürburgring, as well, Suzuka, Monza, Spa. I think the ones that usually, at least for TGP, everyone races on F1 or has experience, and I think they're going to be the most, overall closest racing, because everyone knows what they're like. It's just getting used to the car, really. But then you've got other circuits such as Dragon Trail, obviously, and a few others where people don't really know them too well. So you could see at those circuits major surprises in the overall results.
Yeah, I think the F1 circuits, that people have raced on in other games, will definitely bring the field closer, just because it's easier to get used to it, because it's a track that they know. And I think another track that we will definitely see a lot of close racing at will be the Tokyo Expressway East Outer Loop, because the slipstreaming at that track is just going to keep people in battles that they may not ordinarily be in, because just of how long that pit straight is. So the slipstream is just going to be incredible around that track.
Yeah, I think that one is going to be certainly a very interesting race. But you mentioned the circuits that we feature in other games there could lead to more close racing. Could we also have a bit of a reverse of that, where we find that actually the circuits which we don't go to at all or have never been to before can actually throw up surprises in another way?
I think so, potentially, yeah. It will be very interesting to see, if it's a track where most people aren't very experienced, then yes, it could perhaps bring people closer together because, they're not, no one's as familiar with the circuit as they would be with, a track like Interlagos or Monza. And, they might not know, the perfect lines or, the techniques that they like to use. So, it could potentially bring things closer together as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I also think as well probably more mistakes as well, which even from the top guys who are fighting for championships, so it could spice that up as well. So yeah, I definitely think the less known tracks will make more mistakes, which will again spice it up even more.
Well, certainly, we've got opportunities for a lot to happen and a lot to change. And from my experiences as well of playing the game, much like in Project Cars, if you make a mistake, it does punish you a lot, and you do tend to lose a lot of time.
Yeah, it is a game where like if you dip a wheel on the grass, your car will spin. It's not as forgiving as other games. So, it's definitely important to have a clean run.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thankfully, in terms of weather forecasting, we should see things be relatively consistent through the year. We're running from memory clear settings for each of the tracks, so no weather hampering. So we really are going to see the drivers in scenarios where they're pushing to the absolute most for most of the sessions, most of the season, and hopefully during most of the race as well, which can really create, hopefully, what we're going to find is a really good racing atmosphere throughout the whole thing. And I think that everything should be coming together to create that. I'm going to ask you chaps now as well. Before I was thinking maybe I wouldn't, but I kind of want to put you on the spot. Who do you think is going to be the top three to really look out for? Who are we going to be expecting to see there up at the front most of all? Because I know who mine are, and two of you are in this party at the moment, which is why I've got you here. But who do you think we're really going to see up there a lot of the time?
I think someone to definitely look out for is Coward. I've raced him before, and it's been very close between the two of us. So I think he will definitely be right up there. I'm interested to see, what Alex Coates can do. I know that he quite likes the game. I think Softy, of course, will be right up there, of course. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. Maybe we'll see some surprises.
Yeah, I think pretty same as Roy there. I think I'd like to say myself, but I think I might be a bit too far back. Maybe the odd time here and there. I think it'll be mainly Roy, Koa, and I'm going to say Chris Thurgood. I think will be probably the top three, or at least fighting for the wins the majority of the time, and then maybe the likes of Alex Coates, and maybe myself as well as Owen. The odd other time, but I think they're the top three. I'd say at the present.
Could we see John up there as well? He's been very successful in other series before and fancies himself a little bit on a game like this. Could John be a key player, or maybe not as much?
I think he will be
Yeah, go on.
podium.
Yeah, 100%. I think he'll have some good pace. Over the course of a season, at least in other series in recent times, he's not been maybe sort of as consistent throughout the whole season, but he does show glimpses of pace. But again, you never know. We've never done a GT Sport League before. We're only going on assumptions of who we think is going to be quick. So there may be some big surprises who are far quicker than what we give them credit for.
Yeah, I think we'd also see James fighting for podiums. I know at certain tracks he's a very quick driver. Interesting to see what Luca will do as well. There's some drivers where we don't really know their pace right now. So this is why it's going to be even more exciting to see that first qualifying session, or rather the first night of racing, just to kind of get an idea of the pecking order.
Definitely. Well, we've got, thankfully, to keep things interesting, even at the lower end of the running order, we've got points going down to 15th place, so plenty to fight for throughout the whole of the race. But it does also reward maybe a driver who is not quite on form during the race, who finds himself a little bit lower down the order, still picking up some solid points as an overall sort of championship challenge, which could help them out certainly throughout the whole of the season, which could be really encouraging to see.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, chaps, for joining me. I think we've definitely turned every stone over, and I have to say, I hope you two will agree with me, but I'm really looking forward to this first season. I think it's the unknown of it. I think it's the fact that this is a new game, and I think we've just got a lot of ingredients to make what could be, hopefully, a very exciting series over this first season, and hopefully more to come too. So, yeah, thank you both for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this overview of things as well. Any last pointers that either of you have got to make the season coming up?
I expect a lot of surprises.
Yeah, agreed.
Good. Well, that's what we at TGP like to do, and we do seem to do very well. So thank you very much all for listening. We look forward to the inaugural round of the TGP GT series coming up very soon, and it will be on your screens a lot sooner than you may think as well, as round 1 is taking place on the 26th of May, Tuesday the 26th of May, and which is now, from the day we're recording this, only about 10 days or so away. So thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week where we're going to be looking over a review of the TGP1, TGP2 and TGP Dirt series, which are all coming to a close at the same time. So a really exciting podcast next week. Thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you all soon.